The draft peace agreement to end Russia's war against Ukraine, which the U.S. presidential administration handed over to Kiev, is currently at the framework concept stage and will be subject to change. This was immediately stated in Washington, as was the fact that, for now, all negotiations and coordination of details are taking place behind closed doors. Meanwhile, the press is already full of speculation and outright misinformation. Why shouldn't we jump to conclusions or trust unverified information? Let's break it down. The plan is said to be written entirely under Putin's dictation. The White House has set an aggressive timeline for Kiev and expects Zelensky to sign everything by November 27th. In Kiev, they decided to rewrite several points of the document without informing anyone. This is just a small sample of the headlines from publications that appear both in the media and on social networks. The Office of the President of Ukraine confirmed that they received a draft plan from the United States, which, according to the American side, could help jumpstart negotiations between Kiev and Moscow. But all the details of the document and the main steps that should follow, Volodymyr Zelensky plans to discuss with Donald Trump in the coming days. Kyiv once again emphasized that any peace plan is impossible if it is based on appeasing the aggressor. This will only bring more wars and cruelty to both Ukraine and all of Europe.
From the very first days of the war, we have taken one very simple position. Ukraine needs peace. And real peace. The kind that won't be broken by a third invasion. A dignified peace, so that the terms respect our independence, our sovereignty, and the dignity of the Ukrainian people. And it is exactly these conditions that we must ensure. We will not make any harsh statements and are focused on clear, honest work. Ukraine, the United States, and our friends and partners in Europe and around the world.
Some media even reported that the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Rustem Umerov, had already approved this plan and signed everything. Supposedly, that's why he flew to the United States. Umerov himself stated that this information has nothing to do with reality. First of all, during his visit to Washington, he did not have such authority. And secondly, painstaking work on each point is currently underway at the technical level. And again, Ukraine's sovereignty, the safety of its people, and a just peace remain the top priorities.
While work with the American delegation continues in Kiev, there are speculations in the public sphere about the content of the consultations. I want to clarify something briefly right away. During my trip to the United States, my role was purely technical. It was about organizing meetings and preparing the dialogue. I did not make any assessments, let alone agree on any points. That is not within my authority and does not align with the procedure. Rustem Umerov, Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, Ukraine, on Telegram.
Meanwhile, many analysts point out that Washington has no reason to make any concessions to the Kremlin. Moscow has, in fact, derailed the summit in Budapest that was announced by Trump. Putin responded to the White House's peace initiatives with shelling of Ukrainian cities and the killing of civilians. Trump imposed sanctions against Russian giants Rosneft and Lukoil and essentially gave Congress the green light to pass yet another package of restrictions. By the way, members of Congress themselves claim that they have never officially seen any documents outlining the principles for ending the war in Ukraine. At the same time, senators are convinced that any plan must include clear guarantees of U.S. military support for Ukraine, as well as steps that would prevent the Kremlin leader from continuing to fund the war.
No plan will work until Putin and his allies believe that we are truly ready to provide greater military assistance, to give Ukraine more capability to strike painful blows against Russia militarily, and to impose significantly greater economic consequences on those who finance Putin's war machine. Lindsey Graham, a Republican senator, in an interview with The Hill.
In addition, Axios reports that the U.S. has prepared a draft security guarantee for Ukraine based on the principle of NATO's Article 5. And the plan will stipulate that a major and deliberate attack by Moscow on Ukraine will be considered a threat to the entire transatlantic community. In such a case, Washington and its European allies commit to act together, including the possibility of using military force. And such provisions effectively elevate Ukraine to the level of expanded ally commitments from key NATO countries.
A large-scale and deliberate attack by Russia on Ukraine will be interpreted as a threat to the entire transatlantic community. In such a case, Washington and its European allies pledge to respond in a coordinated manner, including the use of military force. The document notes that these commitments take effect immediately upon signing, are valid for 10 years, and can be extended by mutual agreement of the parties. The U.S. emphasizes that any actions by Moscow that violate the terms of a future ceasefire will be considered through the joint Ukraine-NATO assessment mechanism. From a publication by Axios Agency.
Any peace plan that can be implemented must be supported by both Ukraine and Europe. This was stated by the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas. In fact, according to her, this document could consist of just 2 points. Weaken Russia and support Ukraine. Sanctions are having a strong impact on the Russian economy, which means unity must be maintained and pressure on the aggressor must continue.
Russia has repeatedly hypocritically talked about peace negotiations, but previous talks failed because it never made any real commitments. The pressure should be on the aggressor, not the victim, because encouraging aggression will only provoke a new wave of it. That is why the European Union has a clear 2-point plan. First, to weaken Russia. Second, to support Ukraine.
German Foreign Minister Johann Wadefuhl stated that at this stage, he considers the peace plan to end the war in Ukraine solely as a list of issues that all parties still need to discuss. According to him, the document that the American negotiators brought to Kyiv is not the final version. Wadefuhl also emphasized that Berlin's position remains unchanged, to support Ukraine and ensure it can negotiate from a position of strength.
Germany's position is Europe's position, and that means we support Ukraine. We want to ensure that Ukraine has the opportunity to discuss these issues from a position of strength, and it is Ukraine that will have to decide what compromises to make. Just as Russia must make such decisions on its side, we are not arbiters here, but defenders of Ukraine, because Ukraine is defending its own freedom and the freedom of Europe.
Since the very beginning of Russian aggression, Ukraine has always supported any peace initiatives and has been ready for negotiations on terms that take its national interests into account. All that the Kremlin has demonstrated all this time is blackmail, threats, and impossible demands. And very often, after yet another round in Istanbul, dozens of missiles and hundreds of drones would be launched at Ukraine. Blood and destruction, that's all Russia has offered. And the Deputy Permanent Representative of Ukraine, Pryan, reminded the whole world of this once again.
Any genuine peace process must respect fundamental principles. The principle of nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine and nothing about Europe without Europe. And let me be absolutely clear, we will not condone the genocidal intentions underlying Russian aggression, which undermine our identity, including our language. There is only one realistic way to end this war. Russia must be forced to retreat economically, politically, and militarily.
So the plan currently being discussed in the U.S. is a framework and will be further developed. At the same time, both Kyiv and European partners emphasize that any peace process is only possible with Ukraine's active participation and respect for its sovereignty. The unity of the Allies must be key to deterring the aggressor, because any concessions to Putin will only encourage him to launch new attacks and escalate further.
Subscribe to UATV English and stay updated on the most important events, top news from Ukraine and all over the world, in-depth analysis, exclusive reports and interviews, all on hand in our channel. Join our community of viewers and stay tuned.